Connaughtman, how are ye? Welcome to the Candlelittales podcast. My name is Aaron and I'm one of the co-founders of Candlelittales. Sorcha Hegarty is going to be telling this week's story, The Death of Conall Cearnach. Very excited about this one. He's a mad character. It's a mad story. Looking forward to it. Our Patreon support is how we make these podcasts. You can go to patreon.com/candlelittales to do that, or, just like and subscribe and share and tell someone about it. You know the deal. Follow us on socials, see the links below, and stay tuned for Sorcha telling us this class story. Take it away, Sorcha.
Conall Cearnach was one of the great warriors of Ulster, extraordinary in appearance and extraordinary in his deeds. One side of his face was pale as milk, and the eye in that side of his face was as black as the shell of a beetle. The other side of his face was ruddy and speckled as a foxglove, and the eye in that side of his face was blue as cornflower. His hair was so bushy that if you threw an entire barrel of rowan berries over his head, not one of them would land on the ground. And Conall Cearnach had a crooked neck. The name Cearnach meant crooked-necked one, and he had gotten that neck from his mother's brother, Ket MacMothach. She, Finchem, was a woman of Connaught, and Ket was a warrior of Connaught. And as long as she was pregnant, her brother had promised to defend her, but as soon as her child was born, the druids there prophesied that he would be a great warrior of Ulster, and that he would kill more Connaughtmen than were alive that day. And so Ket threw the child to the ground and tried to stand on his neck, and tried to kill him. But the druids were not finished. They concluded that this child would be so powerful that no one man could kill him, even now when he was a baby. And so Ket withdrew in frustration, and Conall Cearnach was brought back to Ulster by his mother and raised to be a warrior there. And Conall Cearnach was indeed a great warrior of Ulster. He challenged Cúchulainn for the champion's portion repeatedly, and although he failed, the two had great respect for one another. And it was Conall Cearnach and Cúchulainn who had the agreement that whichever one of them died first, the other would avenge his death. And so it was. When Cúchulainn died, tied up to that pillar stone, Conall Cearnach was the first of the Ulstermen to shake off his pangs and arrive on the battlefield. And when he saw Lugad, killer of Cúchulainn, standing there with Cúchulainn's sword in his hand and his other hand severed from him, Conall Cearnach tied his own hand behind his back, the better to make things nice and fair. And then he killed Lugad as brutally as he could. Over the years, Conall Cearnach clashed again and again with Ket MacMothach, the brother of his mother, who had once protected him before he was even born. It was Ket, indeed, who gave Cruthor MacNessa the wound in his head that eventually killed him. One day Conall Cearnach came across the camp of Ket MacMothach while Ket was raiding across the border in Ulster, and Ket was in it, sleeping. So Conall decided he'd play a trick on him. He stole a lock of hair from each of Ket's horses, tied it to the rim of his own chariot, and made off before he woke. But when Ket woke, he could see that his camp had been disturbed, and he knew that no one but Conall Cearnach would have the gall to do that to him, and so he followed, and the two of them fought a great battle. And at the end of 3 days of fighting, Ket MacMothach lay dead, and Conall Cearnach lay almost dead. They were found at the ford by a man named Belcoo. And Belcoo gave a great shout of delight. The two worst slaughterhounds in Ireland had finally done each other in, and now there might be peace for everybody else. But then he noticed that Conall Cearnach was still breathing, and he felt himself honour bound to take him home. Once Conall Cearnach was in his house, Belcoo swore that he would not take on an injured man. It would not be honourable. Now Belcoo was an honourable man, but he was still a Connaughtman, and he did not want to let Conall Cearnach leave his house. And so he made a deal with Conall. He said, "You may stay here, you may eat my food, you may partake of my hospitality until you are feeling strong enough to leave. And on that day, I myself will fight you in single combat." Conall Cearnach agreed with this. He was not in much shape to disagree with anything. And he set about eating Belcoo out of house and home. Now when Belcoo saw how much food the warrior of Ulster could eat, an entire boar in one go, he began to regret his bargain, and he began to regret his kindness, and he called on his 3 sons to come to him. He made a plan with them, that he would tie Conall Cearnach to his bed, and his sons would come in and kill Conall in the night. And that way, Belcoo would not have to break his word by killing an unarmed man. Technically. But Conall Cearnach, who was feigning sleep in the next room, heard everything. And when Belcoo came to tie him to the bed, he overpowered Belcoo and tied him down, gagging him into the bargain, and hid behind the door, waiting for the 3 sons to burst in. He let them murder their father in the dark before turning on them himself and tearing them to pieces and making his way back to Ulster. And so it went with Conall Cearnach. Over the years, he would come close to death, but he always managed to slip away from it. He always came out on top, always victorious. Until a terrible fate befell him. Conall Cearnach became an old man. He got sick, a disease called leprosy. He lost his fearsome reputation. He was offered the kingship of Ulster, but he turned it down. It was not for him. And at the end of his life, he was taken in by Maeve of Connaught and her husband Ulster. They were the only people in Ireland who could afford to feed Conall Cearnach. Even in his age and his weakness, he still had that tremendous appetite. And so Conall Cearnach found himself alone in the hall of Cúchulainn, with warriors of Connaught all around him, and not a one of them the least bit afraid of Conall Cearnach. It seemed that this might be his fate, the worst fate that could befall a warrior of his age, to die fat and comfortable and in his sleep. But Maeve came to him one May day, and she told him that her husband Ulster was having a dalliance with another woman. Now Maeve and Ulster had married under the understanding that Ulster was to have no jealousy of Maeve, but Maeve had made no such promise. Her husband was not allowed to sleep with other women, and so she asked Conall Cearnach to kill Ulster for her, and he agreed with delight. Conall Cearnach had not killed a man in years. He took his spear, he went to the door of Ailill's bedchamber, and he put his spear right through the back of Aill MacMothach. And then he turned and ran. When they saw Aill murdered so blatantly before them, the warriors of Cúchulainn gathered up their arms and set off in hot pursuit. They pursued Conall Cearnach for 7 days, and they finally cornered him at a ford in Cavan. And he turned around there at bay and he gave them a great battle. A battle for the ages. He choked that ford with the bodies of his enemies. This old, sick man made his last stand, and he made every breath count. And when at last Conall Cearnach fell, he was not killed by one man. He was killed by all of them.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. This concludes our death series. It's sad, I know, but all good things must come to an end. We will be sticking with the Ulster cycle for a little bit longer in our next series of stories, but stay tuned for more details there. We will have our post-show chat going live on Sunday, talking about Conall Cearnach and these death stories, going live on Sunday at 7 o'clock Irish time. So like and subscribe to the YouTube channel to get a notification of when we actually do that. 7 o'clock, Sundays, Irish time. You can find out more details about us on our website, candlelittales.ie. Follow us on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at candlelittales to find out more about what we're doing, if we're doing any live streaming and all that kind of crack. And you can definitely hit subscribe on the YouTube channel to make sure you're notified about when we go live, because there could be very exciting things happening around the corner. 2021, huh? Deadly. Liking and subscribing to this channel really makes a difference, so we get to tell more stories to more people. Find the show notes below with all of the links that you might need, and also, well, a huge thank you to the Patreon support we get for making these podcasts. You can go to patreon.com/candlelittales to throw us a few bob, or go to the PayPal button through our website to also throw us a one-off donation. It's hugely appreciated. Thank you so much all for all of you who do that, and stay tuned for the next episode where we'll be chatting about this story live on YouTube. Thanks a lot, guys. Chat to you soon. This episode was produced and edited by Rory O'Shea and Oisin Ryan. Music by Rory O'Shea and story by Sorcha Hegarty.